Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, August 11th, 2015. Getting into the week here. We've got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A lot of stuff we got to cover today, but we're going to start over in Ukraine. It's not getting a lot of coverage. With one notable exception we'll comment on. But basically, at this point, it is very obvious that Poroshenko has completely abandoned even the pretense of complying with the Minsk agreements. He has basically launched a major offensive against the Donbass, and there were like 500 shells just in the past day, and they're not being very careful about their targets. They're just pounding the place. They're killing civilians, blowing up civilian infrastructure. It's punishment. It's not really war here. Now, the East Ukraine militia says Kiev is starting to reinforce their troops along the direction to Mariupol and maybe looking at a major offensive going that way. The observers for the OSCE are once again saying that they are being shelled by Kiev, and that's becoming a very common pattern. When somebody breaks the agreements, they go on out and try and get rid of the observers so they can't report on what's being done. Now, Great Britain has announced they're going to double the number of advisors, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, that they are sending to Ukraine. So everybody's starting to pour on in. It looks like the flashpoint for World War III is going to be Ukraine. Now, over on the side of the eastern Ukrainian republics, they're issuing an ultimatum that if Poroshenko does march across Mariupol, there will be a counter-offensive directly against Kiev. And at that point, everybody's going to hop on in to get this thing going. The Donetsk People's Republic are reporting that 1,200 people are still being held prisoner by Kiev. 400 remain completely unaccounted for. They're trying to work out some kind of an exchange, and Kiev is just dragging its feet. Meanwhile, Poroshenko is proving that, contrary to the media propaganda that we're getting here in the United States of America, he's not a champion of democracy. They're not bringing human rights and democracy to Ukraine. Ukraine has now banned 376 Russian films and TV series over the past year. We're into the book-burning phase of this whole debacle there, ever since the U.S. overthrow early last year. And things are not going smoothly for Poroshenko. We have seen numerous videos coming out of the Ukrainian parliament where they're getting into fistfights, and it's now reached the stage where apparently they're knocking each other out in their arguments over just how they're going to get out of this mess. Resources within Ukraine are so strained, they have been unable to put out that fire that's burning in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And the problem with that is, because of the process of bioaccumulation, the radioactive contamination from the Chernobyl meltdown has been absorbed into the plant life, which is now what is burning, putting radioactively contaminated smoke up into the air and blowing downwind from there. Now, over here in the United States, the officials in the media are ratcheting up the Russia war rhetoric. Oh, this is all Russia's fault. It's all Putin's fault. It's all whatever. And you probably noticed on the SRN news break where they were talking about how, oh, yes, we've identified, the Buk missile from Russia and Flight 17. Now, the actuality of the situation here is that the investigators in the Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 said they've identified fragments that could be from a Buk missile system. And then immediately the Western media said it was a Russian Buk missile system. Where else could it come from? Well, actually, the Buk was being manufactured in Ukraine. And the investigators into Flight 17 felt compelled to issue a new press release saying that while they think they have evidence of a Buk surface-to-air missile, there is no indication, no evidence whatsoever that it was Russian. And they didn't say that, and they're very angry with the Western media that is trying to put these words into their mouths. But remember, truth is the first casualty of war. Now, interestingly enough, an ex-U.S. intelligence chief, General Flynn, responded to Al Jazeera's recent suggestion that the U.S. administration just turned a blind eye to warnings about the rise of ISIS. And Flynn is saying, no, this wasn't just carelessness. This was a willful decision to ignore the warnings about the rise of ISIS by a government that wanted ISIS to become powerful and influential in order to use as a proxy instrument of U.S. foreign policy in the region. Now, Russia is starting to do what I speculated they would do last week. They're turning the U.S. propaganda against themselves. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, is out there saying that the U.S. and its allies shouldn't be attacking Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria because if Assad falls, the most likely replacement will be an entire government that is ISIS. And, of course, from the point of the U.S., they're saying, well, that's okay with us. That's why we ordered Hillary to... No, we didn't order Hillary to send weapons. I mean, that's why we were airdropping... No, we weren't airdropping. And they're already thrashing around trying to get out of this mess. They've been trapped by their own propaganda. Now, Vladimir Putin has come out saying we need a real global anti-ISIS coalition that includes Syria, Iraq, and the Kurdish forces. Putin is out there saying to the U.S., look, if you are telling us the truth, that you are fighting ISIS, then it's time to include Assad and the Iraq governments in that, which is, of course, completely the opposite of what the U.S. was trying to do. So now they're trapped. Game, set, and match goes to Vladimir Putin. He's turned the U.S. propaganda against themselves, and I'm sure they're frothing and saying, oh, we're evil Putin, evil Putin. Now, a little footnote. This was an article that came out of Global Research talking about an official U.S. government document. This is from the Pentagon, and it's a manual regarding the law of war, what the realities are, not what the U.S. propaganda says, oh, we would never do this and we would never do that. And there's a couple of interesting quotes in there, including the admission that the United States has never signed the treaty banning hollow point ammunition, which most other nations have signed. But this is the one that really got to me. This Pentagon Law of War manual says that use of nuclear weapons is perfectly legitimate. There is no general prohibition in treaty or customary international law on the use of nuclear weapons, nor is the use of nuclear weapons considered inherently disproportionate, even if the target is a military force that does not possess nuclear weapons. Well, if the U.S. government really believes that, why are they making such a big stink about Iran's non-existent, not really being built nuclear weapons? But, I mean, basically, the Pentagon is saying to itself, it's okay to use hollow point ammunition. It's okay to use nukes against non-nuclear armed nations. We never signed any treaties that said we can't. If we feel it's necessary, we'll go ahead and do that. Now, speaking of the Iran deal, Michelle Bachmann has come out saying that the Iran deal is a cause for celebration because it proves the end times have begun in earnest and Jesus is going to come down and invite us all up to the big house. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. And it's a reminder of the kind of people that seem to be drawn to these positions of political candidacy and why we should be very, very worried about them indeed. All right, I know we got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get that call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. The phone lines are really loading up here, so let's just go ahead and get some of these phone calls. David in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was just wondering about that spill in the southwest Colorado. Do you think that there's any other agenda than it being an accident?
Well, I don't know the circumstances of how it is they managed to put out a whole 3 million gallons of this stuff. I'll tell you who benefits from it, though, are the bottled water companies, because nobody's going to be trusting the water coming out of their taps, for a long time if they're in any way connected to the Colorado River. And now whether, Nestle did something, obviously that's not a supposition that we can make. But I find it very difficult that they decided to go into this abandoned mine. It wasn't even being used anymore, and they were going to clean it up, and somehow got 3 million gallons of highly toxic waste that just burst out into the Colorado River. I'd like to see the failure analysis on that one.
Yeah, I saw on the news or something. Of course, they don't give any details, but it said something like this mine had been abandoned for 92 years, and to have that much water flowing out, it wasn't a piece of paper that was covering a hole that was keeping it in there. It seems like it must have taken some effort.
Well, again, I don't know what their approach was to going in and cleaning up the mine. If the mine was flooded, and yes, it might have been, the proper approach is to put in a hose and pump it down from the top. But this sudden gargantuan release, I don't know. We need to know what the details are going on, but certainly this is going to boost bottled water sales all the way downstream of the Colorado, all the way out to the Pacific Ocean.
And one last thing, it seems to, from a really big perspective, with the California drought and all that stuff, it's like they're squeezing California. They're cutting it off from the east or something. So anyway, just wanted to see what you thought. Thank you.
Well, California is in serious trouble. 2 of the state's largest freshwater aquifers have become contaminated with fracking fluid. The water distribution system in California is in very poor repair. The aqueduct systems are cracked. They're leaking millions of gallons of usable water into places in the desert that don't need it. The water mains underneath the city of Los Angeles, same situation. They're cracked and just losing millions of gallons of water. The whole situation is in decay. And now this EPA spill into the Colorado River, California is in serious, serious trouble right now. And it's all due to governmental mismanagement. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. David, we're going to switch over here to Michael in Texas. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing fine.
Hey, so there's a story that came out a week ago, and I don't know if you ever touched on it. I might have missed the episode, and I actually emailed over the article, and it was Putin to Turkey envoy. Tell Erdogan he can go to hell along with ISIL terrorists. Did you ever touch on that? I don't know if you ever seen that article.
Yeah, I did. In fact, you just sent it to me again just now. It's in the mailbox. And I did cover the article. We did report on it. And the idea being that I think Putin is fed up with all this game playing about, we're really going against ISIL, and meanwhile the U.S. is bombing Assad and Turkey is bombing the Kurds. And I think Putin pulled a masterstroke by taking all this propaganda that Turkey and the U.S. have been putting out and flipped it right back on them. And now they're in a corner in terms of being able to move forward.
Yeah, and I just think it's just, I don't know, I think a lot of people, they've always been skeptical of Putin and like his, and his master plan, like his end game, what it was. And I think just him finally coming out and actually telling the envoy, his feelings and just coming out and saying like something that's undiplomatic. Of course, like in diplomatic terms, it's always, our friends America, our friends Turkey, yada yada. And I think he's just like now he's fed up.
Well, I don't blame him for being fed up. His so-called friends have been very unfriendly to him. I don't think Putin has any illusions that Russia and the United States government are friends anymore. The day that Putin took direct governmental control of Russia's central bank was the day he got moved over to the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list, and he's been there ever since.
Yeah, no, and you're exactly right. So I just think it's just, and then there was a story that came out earlier today that Russia, they went ahead and sent 2 of their naval carriers on just a maritime mission over to Iran. So I think that's also kind of symbolic as far as starting to make moves, because the end game, I think, is coming near as far as the United States' rush to start World War III. And especially, I think, now that Turkey has all those Patriot missiles that are stationed there, I think that's his, I think that was kind of like almost kind of firing over the bridge as far as saying, like, we know and then we have the capabilities to to negate whatever that advantage you have.
Turkey got the Patriot missiles because the reality is that Turkey and the U.S. are after Assad, and Turkey does not want Syrian missiles coming back over the border. That's what the Patriots are there for. The bad news, of course, is the Patriot, like so many of these other systems, has been drastically oversold. During Operation Desert Storm, they put the Patriot out there, and they were proclaiming it was a 95% success rate. Then they hemmed and hawed and said, well, actually, it was hitting its targets about half the time. And when the final numbers came in, it actually does not perform very well at all. We saw the same thing with Iron Dome last summer, where they were firing. They were firing 10 of these Iron Dome interceptors for every one bottle rocket coming from Gaza, and they still couldn't get them all.
Yeah, and exactly. So I think, like, now that there's the rush, like, now I think all the countries involved, they're all sensing the push. So I think mainly what those Patriot missiles were is, like, Iran has their Shabab 3 missiles, and that's, like, a very capable ballistic missile. So I think that's what it all kind of came down to, because I think Russia was kind of hamstringed. Like, I think they were trying to play by the rules that the United States and NATO had set. So that's why they never really sent the S-300s over to Syria and whatnot.
No, I disagree. I think Russia, I mean, first of all, Putin has a track record of trying to calm all of these flashpoints down. He went in and negotiated the deal with Syria to surrender the precursors for chemical weapons, got the U.S. to back off from them. Putin has been trying to tone things down up in Ukraine. Putin is acting like a global statesman, and very clearly from his actions, he does not want a new world war. Because I'm sure he, like most Russians, remember just how close the Nazis got to Moscow in big mistake number 2. And so Putin is going out of his way to not offer any provocations whatsoever. He really is playing the peacemaker here, as opposed to Netanyahu or Obama or Erdogan, who think getting a really bloody war going is their best bet for hanging on to power, wealth, and fame. Okay?
Yeah, and this will be my last statement, but yeah, I just think it was just fine. It was just good to hear, like, him actually come out against the whole ISIL thing, because
his patience. I got to let you go, Michael. We got to do a commercial break. Bye-bye. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones here, and we are going to talk to Damien in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. How you doing? Regarding California, what you were talking about, we already talked about it. I would raise you Fukushima on top of that, because as far as California is concerned, they still really, the projections are, they really have no idea what's going on.
Well, they never did. That's the problem. But they're still out there trying to insist that it's all caused by human-caused global warming, and will all go away if we just agree to pay a carbon tax.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're projecting Fukushima. I think they're talking about 40-plus years for this complete decommission, and now we have Obama talking again what he was talking about just prior to Fukushima about opening some new nuclear plants right here in the United States and all these other things. Of course, everything's kind of been shuffled under the rug, and they've kept a lot of things secret about Fukushima in the mainstream media and to the public at large, and he decides to bring it up again.
Well, I mean, there's the issue right here in the United States of America. There's Hanford. There's the WIP processing plant. There's the fact that all of these uranium fission-style reactors, they still don't have a solution for dealing with the waste left over from them. We should be moving at least to thorium cycle reactors, but the U.S. government favors uranium-style fission reactors because you get bomb stuff out of them.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you've talked about this already. So as far as this whole thing with Bernie Sanders and the BLM and everything, I don't know if you're even commenting on this or whatever. There's I definitely don't see a reason why they still are not acknowledging the actual truth and the facts. They kind of are trying to make it. I've seen terms like initial racism by Bernie Sanders and his campaign and all this other thing. And it really was, he responded the same day as the whole beginning time, the first time with the Netroots thing, and he responded within a couple of hours of that in the next thing that one of the next functions that he had with a forum on racial injustice and inequality. And there was really no mention of that. There's just a lot of things that just, it seems like to me there's an arm of the BLM that is working for whomever is funding it, and I've seen evidence that George Soros is funding it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. Black Lives Matter is a political propaganda group because they're the ones that are taking this crisis of police brutality against all Americans and trying to turn it into an issue of racism, to fan that divide, to build up racial tension for politicians to take advantage of. And this attack by BLM on Bernie Sanders, I mean, this reeks of Hillary Clinton dirty tricksterism.
Yes, exactly. I really think that this is more along the lines of the corporate democratic structure, really trying to undermine and get underneath in the underbelly of a real grassroots progressive movement that's happening in this country. Like, you know, whatever your opinions, if you don't agree with, you know, everything or some things, or you know, just one thing of what Bernie Sanders says, if you're on board the movement, this is really directly against the whole corporate democratic structure and the Republican democratic structure, and the corruption, really. So I mean, I think really I'm starting to see them more as something that's undermining that. And I did see something about one of the organizers in this most recent thing in Seattle, something about them also being some sort of a Tea Party instigator or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't.
Well, you know, I like what Bernie Sanders is saying. I don't think he's got the legs to be a serious challenge to Hillary, although obviously somebody does, or they wouldn't be pulling these kind of stunts. I think our best chance at getting Hillary out of the Democratic nomination is for Joe Biden to step in. And it's not because I particularly like Joe Biden, but if he does, he comes in being the incumbent vice president, and that gives him a tremendous position of strength and experience that Hillary cannot compete with. But you know, I think this is going to be one of the dirtiest campaigns that we have seen, and I'm fully expecting we're going to see certain candidates have assassination attempts against them.
Wouldn't be surprised. I hear you about Joe Biden, but I think that is the answer to Hillary's waning in the polls and Bernie Sanders' rise in the polls, is to try to stick somebody else in there, because like I said, he's the only one that's against the structure, and he's the only one that's really for some kind of progressive change.
I wish him luck. I wish him luck. As far as the Democratic nomination is concerned, my philosophy is anybody but Hillary. I don't care who the Democratic nominee is. I just do not want it to be Hillary Rodham Clinton. And I know I'm going to get all kinds of emails saying, you just don't want a woman president. No, I don't have a problem with a woman president. It's that woman I have a problem with.
I hear you. Are you planning to put out that piece on Hillary you were talking about before you were, I know you were still talking.
That actually came out about 2 weeks ago, but I'll repost it. The Epic of Clinton Mess. Yeah, we put that out there. It's a work in progress. Every time I go back in, I find another scandal. But it's a good overview of what's been going on.
Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, getting on over to Israel, here's a very enlightening story from the Jerusalem Post. And this is the headline, word for word. Israel expects U.S. Congress to block Iran nuclear deal, top Likud figure says. And here's a quote from inside the story. Israel anticipates that the U.S. Congress will heed its call and vote down the Iran nuclear deal against the wishes of the Obama administration, the head of the powerful Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee told Israel Radio on Tuesday. Now, I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired and fed up to hear of a U.S. Congress that heeds the call of any foreign government. That's not their job to do. Israel is out there proclaiming to the world, we control the United States of America and you might as well get used to it. And there is a political backlash. And Israel's finally beginning to understand there's a political cost for all of this. There's an article over in counterpunch.org. The headline reads, Israeli missteps take a toll. So there's a coffee mug we sell over in our online store, and on it is the quote, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force it to act like one where everybody can see it. In the modern world, systems of control tend to be hidden so that people don't know what's going on and therefore do not react. It's one thing for Israel to have maintained clandestine control and subversion of the U.S. government for decade after decade, but it only works if the American people really don't know what's going on. And those few who suspect it can be shouted down with screams about you're an anti-Semite, you're a Jew hater, and so forth and so on. But that doesn't work any longer. And there is a growing general sentiment among the American people that, yes, Israel has a disproportionate influence over the U.S. government. Gee, you think? And they're starting to react to that. And the reaction to that is a weakening of U.S. support for Israel, even among American Jews, who are starting to pull back and finally recognize it is the behavior of Israel's government that makes the world more dangerous for the Jewish people of the world. Even the president of Israel is out there saying that Netanyahu's obsession with killing the Iran deal is straining U.S. ties. And Netanyahu is just willing to risk all of that because he's listening to his ego. I'm in charge. I rule the world. I will tell them what to do, and they will do it. Tzipi Livni, who's a member of the Knesset now, has called a meeting of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee saying, we got to talk about what Netanyahu is doing. We could see Netanyahu removed from office by his own government, by hook or by crook. Remember what happened? Well, we'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. And before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about how Tzipi Livni has pulled this Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee together urgently to discuss Prime Minister Netanyahu's campaign in Congress against the Iran nuclear deal, because it has dragged Israel's subversion of the U.S. government into the public eye. It is broadcast to the world that Israel presumes to control the United States government and through it its military. And Israel doesn't like its clandestine political machinations made public. And there may be a move to get Netanyahu out because he's listening to his ego. He's making very poor strategic decisions. He's listening to his ego. I want what I want, and I am going to get it no matter what. And it wouldn't be the first time that prime ministers who were a little too full of themselves died. Remember what happened to Yitzhak Rabin back in 1995? Was very unpopular within his own government. Was assassinated by a crazed lone nut assassin, registered trademark. Wouldn't be the first time. So things may be getting very interesting over there. Now, as you know, the other day we were talking about this Benzi Goldstein, the head of Lahav, is out there in Israel saying that it is legitimate under Jewish religious law to burn Christian churches. That's what they're there for, along with the mosques. Not too surprisingly, the Vatican has responded, asking that Israel bring charges against this guy for basically incitement to burn churches. And I'm sure Israel is saying, yeah, we'll look into that right after we punish the people who burned that 18-month-old baby alive, who they just let go, for those of you not paying attention. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yeah, just a comment. I mean, all these machinations surrounding Netanyahu may be a moot point come February next year, because this petition in the UK is already approaching 50,000. Once it passes 10,000, they have to give a government response, and if it passes 100,000, which I expect it to do before the week's out, then it has to be discussed in Parliament. So we may see a move. I'm hoping, actually, I've signed the petition myself, I'm hoping that it passes 5 million, never mind just 100,000. Then we've got more signatures on the petition than there is Jewish Israelis in their population. So we're looking at a situation which is moving quite rapidly. We know there's an upset between Netanyahu and the Obama administration. There's some strains there. And it looks like maybe the British government will be forced into a position
Well, I wouldn't count too much on the petition because we have a system over here in the U.S. that Obama set up, the White House petition page, and people could put up a petition and they could get signatures, and if they got more than 20,000, the White House would officially respond. Then they raised the limit to 100,000. A lot of petitions have passed that, and the official U.S. government response to these petitions is no. And they say, that's the official government response. We've responded to your petition. That's all we need to do. The reality is, whoops, we seem to have lost a phone connection. The reality is, on all these petition systems, they're basically public whipping posts where you can go out and vent your anger on the petition website, say, I demand fair treatment. But there is no commitment, either from the White House or for the British government, that they will comply with the petition. And sadly, it's not even written into the Constitution. When we have a right to petition the government for redress of grievances, there is no guarantee the government will agree to the redress. They're just supposed to listen, politely nod, and then say, we've heard your petition, go away. Go jump in a lake, take a long walk up a short pier, so forth and so on. All right, while we're waiting for John in Barbados to reconnect here, final little note on that horrible tragedy where the house was burned by the Israelis and the 18-month-old baby and the father were killed. And another indication, Israel's an apartheid state. Okay? The family, the Palestinian family, is not entitled to the government compensation granted to Israeli victims of terror. So if you are the victim of terror in Israel and you are an Israeli who's victimized by the Palestinians, or somebody pretending to be the Palestinians, you get gobs of money from the American taxpayer. If you are a Palestinian and you are the victim of Israeli terror, too bad, you're out of luck, you are on your own. And because of this, the former head of the Shin Bet, Yuval Diskin, is saying there is a de facto Jewish terrorist network being formed on the West Bank, because Tel Aviv just keeps looking the other way. All right, we're going to go back here to John in Barbados. John, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Yeah, we got cut off. Skype went silly. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah, I was looking at some of the news. I'm really shocked at this Pentagon warfare manual. And, I mean, it just shows an absolute moral degeneration in the American psyche.
No. It's a degeneration in the military psyche. And the military psyche has always been, to win is imperative, and it doesn't matter how you do it. It's only if you lose the war that anybody is going to say you committed a war crime.
Oh, well, yeah, but unfortunately, the Pentagon are Americans, so I disagree with you there.
Please do not conflate the attitude of the military mind with the average American citizen, because we don't agree with what the Pentagon is doing. We don't agree with their methods. We don't agree with torture. We don't agree with drone strikes targeting innocent people based on predictive behavior that they may be bad in the future. We don't agree with any of that. We certainly don't like paying all that money into the Pentagon with them losing it $1 trillion a pop.
Oh, apparently now it's up to $5 trillion, Michael.
Well, $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, and soon you're talking some real money.
It's serious money even. Yeah, well, I mean, the fellatio experts in the Pentagon have come out with a perler with this manual for warfare.
Well, I think the manual was there to quell the growing unease in the rank and file service people that what they're being asked to do seems to be war crimes. And this Pentagon manual is out there saying, no, it's really okay for us to use these hollow point bullets. We never actually signed the treaty saying that we have to use full metal jacket only. There are no treaties or international law saying that we can't use nuclear weapons even against countries that don't have them. They're trying to reassure the American service people that what they're being told to do is okay and legitimate, and they have to follow the orders under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Because under the Nuremberg Principle and under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, American service people have a right to refuse an order they think is illegal or immoral. What this manual is there to do is to say, oh no, it's perfectly legal and moral for you to do this. So you can't refuse.
I'm not so sure that actually it does meet the articles of the Fourth Geneva Convention, particularly the hollow point dum-dum ammunition.
No, it doesn't. This is pure propaganda by the Pentagon against its own service people to get them to stop resisting these war crimes that are being ordered to commit.
It seems, as I say, I mean, the depravity now is just unbelievable. I just can't believe the American military has sunk so low. In the 60s, when I was in the UK military doing joint exercise with the American military, this wasn't the game we played.
No, it wasn't. But then back in the 1960s, the U.S. thought it was going to control the world through all these covert overthrows. That system is now broken down. And, of course, what was it? Von Clausewitz said war is the continuation of politics by non-peaceful means, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think what the quotation, war is diplomacy by other means.
Yeah, that's about the same thing. When you can't get what you want in agreement, you just go on out and club the other person over the head until they agree to say, yes, we'll go on using the U.S. dollar, we'll go on with the petrodollar, we'll do what you tell us to do, no matter how much it costs. France has just paid a very high price for going along with that. John, got to take a break for the news. We'll be right back. Thank you for the phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And let's talk about the campaign and the candidates. The GOP and no doubt Hillary Clinton are gnashing their teeth in fury because even after that Fox News debate, possibly because of it, Trump's still leading in the polls. In fact, he's increasing his lead. And this, of course, is contrary to all the predictions we have been getting from corporate media and the rest of the GOP of his imminent doom and collapse and failure. And the GOP is trying to find some way they can block Trump from running a third-party campaign if he doesn't get the GOP nomination. They are so afraid of Donald Trump over at the GOP that they are willing to risk losing the White House to get him out. They are so afraid of Donald Trump over at the GOP leadership, they are absolutely refusing to listen to their own people, which they did with Ron Paul back in 2008 and 2012, rather. We're the GOP leadership. We will pick the candidates for you, and then you will approve the one that we like. Now, we're continuing to see the fallout from the Fox News debates. A lot of people are saying maybe Fox News shouldn't be hosting these debates any longer because it was anything besides fair and imbalanced. Megyn Kelly's on the defensive. Social media is ripping her apart for her performance. She didn't even try and act like she was being professional. And I will never forget that look on her face when she baited Trump with that question about fat women. And Trump one-upped her with the Rosie O'Donnell. He got the audience laughing and on his side, and you could see it on Megyn Kelly's face. She was furious. Now, Megyn Kelly is out there granting her own interviews. She's now become part of the news herself, and she was over doing an interview for NBC saying, I will not apologize for doing good journalism. Well, I beg to disagree. There was no good journalism going on in the Fox News debates. Megyn Kelly launched into an attack on Donald Trump right from the start. Megyn Kelly never asked Chris Christie about Bridgegate. Megyn Kelly never asked Scott Walker about allegations he was part of a scheme for illegally coordinated fundraising or his campaign against public workers as governor. Megyn Kelly didn't ask Rick Perry about his recent indictment for coercing a public official. Megyn Kelly didn't ask Carla Fiorini about how she almost ran Hewlett-Packard into bankruptcy while she was CEO. Megyn Kelly didn't ask Mike Huckabee about his molestation scandal, which has surfaced again. Megyn Kelly didn't ask Ted Cruz about the fact that he's not a natural-born American citizen. Megyn Kelly did not ask Rand Paul about the recent indictment of 3 of his top associates. There was a rich harvest of good journalism arrayed on stage for Megyn Kelly to pick and choose from, but her venom was aimed at Donald Trump and only at Donald Trump, and everybody got to watch it on primetime network TV. Jeb Bush, of course, has leapt to the fore in defending Megyn Kelly as a most professional, talented journalist, which, of course, he's going to say that because Megyn Kelly and the other two moderators were just throwing these softball questions at Jeb Bush all night. They were spoon-feeding him what he wanted to answer. I mean, the bias was just on absolute display. Now, here's where it gets a little more interesting. There's information surfacing from within Fox News itself that the moderators and the producers of the debate actually had a plan to destroy Donald Trump on stage. They were going to goad him until he lost his temper, and they were prepared to literally walk him off the stage. That kind of an image of Trump being escorted off the podium would have destroyed him. And he evaded this quite easily, but the point is, Fox News cannot claim to be fair and balanced. They cannot claim we report, you decide. They were trying to decide for you. There was an overt set-up plan to sabotage Donald Trump right from the start. Now then, of course, for those who've been following the recent scandals about Brian Williams and such, you're not surprised. This is what these people are paid to do. They're not paid to tell you the truth. They're not paid to let you decide. They are paid big bucks to deceive you, fool you, get you to go along with the preordained decision and make it look like you thought that yourself, which is the goal of any propaganda. To lead you to the conclusion the government wants you to think and fool you into thinking it was your own idea. Do you know how much these people get paid? Tom Brokaw, the former NBC anchor, has an estimated net worth of $70 million. Katie Couric at CBS has a $15 million yearly salary, plus a multi-million-dollar marketing budget. Diane Sawyer, $12 million a year. Kelly Ripa, ABC, $20 million a year. Glenn Beck, well, you know, this is the age of the feminist. He's only getting $2 million a year. Bill O'Reilly over at Fox, $20 million a year. Sean Hannity, same thing. Shepard Smith, $10 million a year. Megyn Kelly, well, I guess she was up bumping for a raise or something. She's only getting $250,000 per year, but her net worth is $5 million. Let's see what we have down here. Jim Cramer over at CNBC, net worth of $100 million. Anderson Cooper, $5 million a year. Brian Williams used to make $13 million a year, but since he got outed for lying to the public, he's down to just a mere $8 million a year. Poor Brian Williams. They has to just get by on $8 million a year. Keith Olbermann was making $5 million when he was at MSNBC. And it goes on and on and on. We have a complete list out there. Piers Morgan, $6 million a year. George Stephanopoulos getting a $5 million a year salary. Wolf Blitzer, $3 million a year. These people make this kind of money because they're very good at fooling you. They're not paid this kind of money to tell you the truth. You can get the truth for free. You can get the truth here. But a well-crafted, effective lie pays big bucks in the United States of America. In fact, I would venture to say that lying to the American people is the only growth industry left in this country right now. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Gus in Missouri, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I was reading a poll by the Anti-Defecation League that said Greece was the most anti-Semitic country in the world. Is that because is that why they're having all the problems they're having over there now?
I'm not sure why. I think maybe that from the point of view of the ADL, anybody who's trying to break free of private central banking is obviously anti-Semitic because all the private central banks are owned primarily by Jewish families. So that's probably where their logic is coming from.
Yeah, I suppose. We need another Spiro Agnew to call the shots like he did, lost his job because of the speech you got about the press.
Well, Agnew lost his job because Nixon needed a former member of the Warren Commission as his vice president before he stepped down to make sure that any subsequent follow-up investigations wouldn't get into what Nixon himself called that Cuban situation. And Gerald Ford did his job. As soon as he was sworn in as president, he pardoned everybody in the Watergate scandal and just shut the investigations down because it was getting a little too close to the U.S. government's involvement in the assassination of JFK. And the very best conspiracies are the ones where even your worst enemy works to keep the secret from the public. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Finishing up on the campaign news, it looks like we're on the verge of seeing our first dropout from the GOP stable of candidates heading for the White House. Apparently, despite his comments on Fox News about how his financial support had been soaring since the debate, Rick Perry has been forced to stop paying his campaign staff. And it looks like he has run out of money and is probably going to be forced to step down soon. So, anyway. Going to go to the phones here. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm hoping you're having a good day.
So far.
That's good. I noticed that you got a pretty good chuckle out of that ATL.
Yeah, I love that. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah. So I took a page out of your book, and I called up my premier, Kathleen Wynne, and of course I got, one of the secretaries, ladies, whoever it was, because apparently she's going to be starting a provincial pension fund, slush fund, collateral, whatever you want to call it. So I pointed out the fact that, this is what it's going to be used for. And the lady went on to explain to me that, there are people in this country that can't survive and they're doing very poorly on their pension. And we have to help those people. I said, well, are you familiar with the Bank of Canada? And she said, yes. And I said, well, in the early 70s, there were no food banks in Canada. And one earner could support a whole household quite comfortably. I said, the problem is that every dollar that's issued through that Bank of Canada is a loan at interest. And because it is, you have to create ever-increasing amounts of dollars in order to pay off the older debts. It's called inflation. If you really want to fix the problem, look at that. And she had no answer for me. So,
Well, okay, the Bank of Canada situation is a little more complicated than that. First of all, anytime you have a debt-based economy, okay, the debt will grow faster than the available money supply, and all those evils you mentioned will follow along. Second of all, the currency is issued by a privately owned bank as a loan at interest, is a way of enslaving the people and driving them into poverty and making the bankers rich. And the only way you avoid that is to do what the young United States did, where the government created the currency and managed the public currency as if it were a public utility, which is why all the big multi-generational banking families hated the young United States of America and were trying to find some way to bring it down, and obviously at this point they've succeeded. The problem with Canada, though, is a little more complex, because Canada's central bank is technically owned by the people. It's privately run by private bankers, but it technically is the property of the Canadian people. And the charter for the Bank of Canada obligates it to provide interest-free loans to the Canadian government for infrastructure development. But back in the 1970s, apparently as a sort of little hidden condition of joining the Bank of International Settlements, the Canadian government stopped getting interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada and started getting those loans from other private bankers at interest, and then dumped the cost of those loans on the Canadian taxpayer, and that is what's driving the Canadian people into poverty. And the Canadian people who are aware of this, and the Canadian government is trying to keep a lid on it, but they're very, very angry, and they have a right to be. And we have the same situation here in the United States of America, where Americans need to stand up and ask, why, if the Constitution grants the U.S. government the right to create and issue an interest-free currency Does our government insist on borrowing currency at interest from a privately owned central bank? It's all ink and paper. It's all numbers in a computer. There's nothing of any real value attached to any of it. The U.S. government issues a paper bond, and the Federal Reserve issues the paper notes, and the future generations of Americans are sold into the slavery of the private central banks.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I did say that. I did say this province, well, you know, we're pretty bad off in this province. Our debt is just as bad as Greece's. And until you address that problem, nothing will change. They're just putting Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids.
That's exactly the problem. Nobody inside the system has the courage, or they've all been bribed, to ignore the problem. Nobody will stand up and say there is a fatal design flaw in the model of private central banking, in that it creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. It's a naturally unstable system, and sooner or later it must collapse. And out of that collapse, the bankers wind up owning all the hard assets, and the people own a lot of worthless paper. That's it.
The sooner it collapses, the better off we'll all be.
Well, we will be better off if we unite together as a single planet and say no more private central banks in charge of our national currency. And anybody who comes along saying, well, we're just going to restart this same model all over again and things will be hunky-dory, we take them, give them a good coating of tar and feathers, and we run them out of town on a rail, and if they dare show up again, you know, we hang, draw, and quarter them, burn them, and have their ashes peed on by a rabid moose.
Not a dog this time, right?
Well, I'm catering to the Canadian sensibilities.
Oh, yes,
there.
There are a lot of moose and caribou up here.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Mike, who was it that came out and said, was it the IMF or was it the World Bank that said that basically central banks have failed all over the world and now it's up to the governments?
That was the IMF. The IMF has come on out and said, yeah, we really made a mess of the global economy, but it's up to the governments to fix it, which from the IMF's point of view means go on out and take more money away from the people to give to the banks to try and balance the books, which in the long term can never be balanced. That's what the IMF is calling on the governments of the world to do, is transfer what little wealth remains in the hands of the people to the bankers so that they own it all, which was part of the plan all along. And from the point of view of the people, the solution is to get rid of private central banks, to do what the young United States did. We fought a revolution to break free of private central banking. And we set up a government-issued currency, and the banking families of Europe have been trying to wreck it ever since. They set up the first bank of the United States. That one was shut down by Congress because it trashed the place. That, in turn, triggered the War of 1812. That forced the U.S. government to accept the second bank of the United States. That one was shut down by Andrew Jackson, who had an immediate assassination attempt on his life. And it just goes on and on. If you have not already read it, there's an article at the top of my website, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. And you need to read that and study it, and then you'll understand what it is that drives America's history of assassinations, of wars, of poverty and suffering. And you need to know it. The bankers don't want you to know it, but you need to know it. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Al. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Let's talk about the economy for a little bit. As you heard on the SRN news break, Greece has agreed to a third bailout deal, coming with it, of course, more crushing austerity. They're going to be slashing their social budgets, and they're agreeing to more privatization. That's the real payoff. The collective property of the Greek people is to be sold into private hands. The nation that the people of Greece have built will now pass into other hands and be rented back to the people of Greece. That's the model, to take people who own a nation and turn them into serfs on private estates. They're calling it neo-feudalism. And that's what the money junkies want. They want to go back to the glory days of the high medieval period where there are castles and lords and ladies and everybody else just crawls around in the mud doing what we tell them to do. That's where it's aiming. Now, needless to say, the people of Greece are getting very upset about what's going on. They're feeling very betrayed by Tsipras and the Syriza party. The Greek dock workers are starting to organize. There's talk there may be a strike to shut down the docks, possibly trigger another collapse. Now, there's a very interesting article that came out of Sputnik News pointing out that the reason Greece and so many other European Union countries are in trouble is because those nations with the money, particularly Germany, haven't been following the Eurozone stability rules. They were out there playing high-stakes gambling, engaging in speculation and manipulation. That's what was going on. We see it on Wall Street. We see it in London. We're seeing it in Brussels. Now, there's another article came out of RINF.com reporting on how it's getting harder and harder for the European Union hawks to get their nations to go along with more sanctions on Russia, because these sanctions are harming European businesses. Businesses that were doing trade with Russia have been driven out of business in this rush to get us into a new world war. Now, over in Russia, interestingly enough, they're embarking on a program of enriching their population. It's sort of a repeat of when the U.S. opened up the territory, the Louisiana Purchase, to the homesteaders. And Russia is giving away 1 hectare of farmland and forest to its citizens. And that's kind of an interesting thing. When was the last time you saw the U.S. government give you something of substantive value? They're always taking it. We're going to take this river. We're going to take this pasture. We're going to take all of this thing. We'll give you a little piece of paper with a note on it. See, that proves that you got value for value here. Now, the big news today is that China devalued the yuan. Up until now, China has pegged the yuan to the dollar. They depegged it. They devalued it. It sent shockwaves around the world, including the American stock market. And it looks like this could be the start of a real-life currency war. Now, China's official position is they had to devalue the yuan to rebuild their export market. That's not going to work because their primary export market was the United States of America, and we, the American people, don't have any money left to go to the big box stores and buy whatever China is importing, no matter how low a price it is. We're too busy having to replace stuff we bought 3 years ago that's already dying. Now, as expected, Puerto Rico defaulted officially yesterday. They didn't even come close to having the money they needed for the bond payment. What money they did have went to the Wall Street hedge funds at the expense of social institutions that were helping the poor people of Puerto Rico. As always, the bankers get their money, and the poor people are made poorer. The hungrier, the homeless. That's it. That's the banker mentality. All the money comes to us, and the rest of you, go away. If you're no use to us, you should just go off and die. Down in Venezuela, as you know, they're having serious economic repercussions. And over the last couple of days, and even last week, we were getting these reports on CNN about massive looting and all this other violence going on. Venezuela's government has launched an investigation against CNN Español because apparently a lot of these stories about massive looting were just made up out of thin air to make Venezuela look bad, possibly sell the idea that Venezuela is descending into chaos, necessitating American intervention to bring stability and peace to that region of the world. We've all heard that before. And we know that the U.S. has been trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela all the way back to the time of Hugo Chavez, who dared sell Venezuela's oil to China for the yuan, which is why Venezuela is a late addition to the United States government's special high-interest targets list. Up in Chicago, blaming pension requirements, their city has decided to lay off some 500 teachers from the school system because of increasing pension costs. Well, why are the pension costs increasing? Well, back in 2008, when Wall Street put out these mortgage-backed securities, they were rated AAA by Wall Street's ratings agencies, which made it legal for pension plans to buy them. The fraud imploded. The pensions were defunded. Nobody has the courage to stand up and say Wall Street made this mess. So what do? They turn around. They attack the public workers. They blame the pensioners. You're living too long. You should have died long ago. We saw Scott Walker do that in Wisconsin. And now Chicago is laying off teachers because of the increasing pension costs. Because the pensions are trying to recover the money that was taken from them by Wall Street. And the blame for all of this always trickles down. Oh, it's the fault of the firefighters. It's the fault of the police officers. It's the fault of the teachers. We never criticize the bankers. We never question the wisdom of people with large amounts of money. Now, down in Texas, McDonald's is creating an experimental restaurant where it's going to mostly be robots. You will go in, you will press a touchscreen for what you want. A robot will bring you, presumably, a stainless steel hamburger. Wendy's is going to do the same thing. They're transforming some of their restaurants to self-ordering and automation. You will touch a touchscreen, you'll swipe a plastic card, and your meal comes out on a conveyor belt. I don't think I want to eat there, especially with the current state of software development, plus where they're buying their food from. And I used to like Wendy's on those occasions when I went to fast food restaurants. Meanwhile, we're getting word that Goldman Sachs and HSBC just bought 7.1 tons of physical gold. So they're apparently unconcerned about the recent price suppression of gold. They're taking advantage of it. So let's talk a little bit about Hillary Clinton. She's out there trying to basically dodge the email scandal, dodge all of these other issues, and she's on the campaign warpath, saying that she's going to have, if she's elected president, she will have a college affordability plan that is going to address the high costs of college and, crack down on the for-profit colleges because of all the money that they're taking and spending. Of course, she didn't feel that way when her husband, Bill Clinton, was collecting more than $16 million as honorary chancellor of Laureate Education, a for-profit company that runs 80 educational institutions around the globe. He got $16 million over 4 years. Now that he's got his money, Hillary Clinton is going to rein in those for-profit educational institutions. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about Hillary Clinton and some of the material that is surfacing from her emails is proving very interesting, and it's going beyond Libya, it's going beyond classified information. Apparently some of these emails confirm that Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton appears to have disobeyed Barack Obama's policy regarding the Honduras coup and continued funding for that, even as Obama was telling the world that all such aid had been suspended. Now, I say appeared to be, because it could very well be that Obama told her, keep on funding it, I'm going to tell everybody we're not involved anymore. And this creates a very interesting situation as this scandal escalates. Because is Obama going to basically come out and say, I lied to protect the presumptive Democratic nominee? Or is he going to be worried about his legacy and let Hillary eat this one? And will Hillary sit quietly for that to happen? So there's a big schism opening up between the Obama White House and Hillary Clinton here. Now there's a little bit of bad news regarding Larry Klayman's RICO lawsuit against the Clintons. This was the one that was out there exploring all the favors done by Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. At the same time, involved parties were pouring money into the Clinton Foundation. It included waivers on the Iran sanctions. And, of course, this was the lawsuit that was seeking to obtain the flash drive of Hillary Clinton's emails, the only known electronic copy of them, held by Hillary Clinton's lawyer, David Kendall. And I had speculated that Kendall might argue against surrendering the flash drive on the basis of lawyer-client privilege, but he doesn't have to bother anymore. Because apparently, the judge in the case, Donald Middlebrooks, just threw the entire case out of court. Just dumped the whole thing. And Judge Donald Middlebrooks was appointed by President Bill Clinton. And even liberal publications like Politico and the Washington Times had said Middleton should have recused himself and not be allowed to preside over this case. We saw the same thing with Scott Walker. He was facing investigation and prosecution up in Wisconsin, but as soon as he announced for the presidency, it all just magically went away. Nobody's going to believe that the Clintons are innocent. If anything, it just solidifies the public perception of corruption, cronyism, and cover-up. The 3 C's that made America great. All right, let's talk about immigration. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Illegal alien arrested for attempted rape gets released. Then rapes again. Donald Trump was right. This is a problem. And everybody out there wagging their politically correct finger at him, they are wrong. They'll never admit it. It's the essence of the politically correct mindset that we are always right, no matter how wrong we are, because we are, after all, politically correct. And that's all that really matters. Now, there's a growing brouhaha over the government's no-fly list. Last year, there was an ACLU lawsuit, and U.S. District Judge Anna Brown ordered the federal government to create a mechanism for people who are on the no-fly list to appeal that decision and say, I shouldn't be on there. And even the government admits the vast majority of people on the no-fly list shouldn't be there. But up until last year, there was no mechanism for anybody who's on that list to get their name off. And so now there is a redress inquiry, but there's a little bit of a problem. It's hard to get off the list if you don't know why you were put on there to begin with. And the government is taking the position that they don't have to tell you why you're on the no-fly list, because that would endanger national security. And they went on and on about the special prerogatives of the executive branch to make these decisions. Now, I have read the Constitution several times. The executive branch doesn't get special prerogatives to ignore the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. In fact, nobody in the government does, not even the NSA. The government's attitude is, just trust us, we're doing the right thing. Absolutely not. Not after Obamacare. If this government told me it was a sunny day, I would feel morally obligated to get an umbrella. And it gets even worse than that. Because according to an article over in The Guardian in Great Britain, the U.S. government is admitting that you can be put on the no-fly list because of what are politely termed predictive assessments. In other words, you are just an ordinary person going about your business. You have never committed a crime. You have done nothing wrong. You have no known associations with terror groups. And the U.S. is admitting they can still put you on the no-fly list if somebody thinks maybe down the road you could be a threat. This came out in a filing before an Oregon federal judge in which the U.S. government admitted anybody that we guess might be a threat gets on the no-fly list. It's pre-crime, right out of Minority Report. Our psychics are pretty much convinced that you're going to do something bad, so we're going to put you on the no-fly list. I think that movie, Minority Report, was very prescient about how out of control such systems can become. Now, over in Great Britain, since we're talking about The Guardian, there are now no less than 5 active police investigations into allegations of child sex abuse by Sir Edward Heath. And everybody is saying, why wasn't this happening while he was still alive? I mean, the guy is dead. What are they going to do? Dig him up and put him in jail? Now, over in New York City, things are getting really bad. Crime is up, not too surprisingly. Despite all the random shootings of people by the police, crime is still up. And the Guardian Angels have reformed. Now, for those of you who don't remember who they are, the Guardian Angels is a street gang with a very noble purpose. They patrol the neighborhood streets. It's kind of like Neighborhood Watch, only with black leather jackets. And after 20 years of not doing it, they're coming back together to form their own neighborhood patrols to actually try and keep crime under control, because the police department is simply too busy writing out tickets and civil forfeiture and all those important things to keep the city budget operating. And crime is completely out of control. Something that the New York Police Department actually is doing, they're taking photographs of the homeless and posting them online to websites to publicly shame the homeless and maybe drive them away. Do you not think these people already feel shame? They're homeless. They're living on the streets. What a complete waste of time and money to go on out and take their pictures and put them on a website saying, see, they're homeless. Anybody walking by knows they're homeless. They know they're homeless. Nobody's proud of being homeless. It's a brain-dead public relations stunt. And in another PR disaster, the apparently well-funded New York Police Department, I guess all that money coming in from civil forfeiture, is buying $4.5 million worth of new taser guns for its officers. It's a stunning move, to be sure. Anyway. All right, we're coming up here on our top of the hour news break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some incidents with gun control, gun bans, the out-of-control state law mishmash, and various other issues. So we're going to take a break here for the news, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Now, one of the areas where gun owners, legal gun owners, are getting into trouble is how the laws change from state to state to state. And very often they're unaware of that. There's one story here in governmentslaves.info about a Marine who carried a legal gun to New York and fell afoul of New York's new gun laws and is now looking at 15 years in prison. He didn't do anything with the gun. And this illustrates a very dangerous change that has happened to the United States of America. Because when I was a kid, admittedly a long time ago, the laws punished actions. If you did something wrong, you go to jail. Today, the law punishes possessions, and in some cases in California, non-possession. What? You haven't had your vaccine, you're going to go to jail. Now, there's another incident about a gentleman from Georgia named Brian Fletcher. North Carolina. And he's a power line worker. And he got called from North Carolina to go to New Jersey to help deal with a power emergency. And then after he did his work, he was sleeping in his work truck, and the New Jersey police came by, knocked on the door, said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm emergency repairs here. I'm just getting some sleep." And the New Jersey police asked if he had a firearm, and he said, yeah, he had a gun for self-defense in his truck, whereupon he was immediately arrested, had to pay $25,000 in bail to get out, and if convicted under New Jersey's gun laws, is looking at between 5 and 10 years. Now, gun rights groups have been after Chris Christie to intervene as a very obvious misapplication of the law. This guy from North Carolina, Brian Fletcher, committed no illegal action. In fact, he came up there to help New Jersey deal with an emergency crisis. And the charges ought to be dropped. And Chris Christie is refusing to take a stand because he doesn't want to offend the gun grabbers. And there's an interesting video on WhatReallyHappened.com where a gun rights activist is trying to get him to talk about the case, and Christie just runs away. No comment, get away. He's running away, or is waddling away in Christie's case. And it is an issue here, both because of the disparity between gun laws from state to state, and I go back to that Second Amendment. Shall not be abridged. And this idea that we live in a nation where the possession of or the non-possession of certain things can get you in trouble. If they catch you driving using a cell phone without the earpiece, you can go to jail. And again, that shouldn't be the way the law works. The law should punish those who behave badly. And we're looking at this repairman. Went up to New Jersey to help them out, looking at 5 years in prison. And then you have this illegal immigrant had raped somebody. They let him go so he could go out and rape again. Which leads us to this article that appeared over in Zero Hedge. You live in a country run by idiots and if you are a fan of Jeff Foxworthy, you're going to love this. It's a whole list of these statements. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. If you can get arrested for hunting or fishing without a license, but not for being in the country illegally, you live in a country run by idiots. If you have to get your parents' permission to go on a field trip or take an aspirin in school, but not to get an abortion, you live in a country run by idiots. If you have to show identification to board an airplane, cash a check, buy liquor, or check out a library book, but not to vote on who runs the government, you live in a country run by idiots. And there's a whole collection of these. You can do your Jeff Foxworthy impersonation. And it is true, in this age of political correctness, innocent behavior is being punished, while rampantly criminal behavior is being allowed to go free. Speaking of which, let's talk about that EPA disaster. Now, I still don't know the exact details of how the EPA went in to clean up this abandoned, defunct mine and dumped 3 million gallons of highly toxic water into the Colorado River. Contains, among other things, lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury. Now, the U.S. government is saying that the EPA will not face any fines for what they've done under the principle of sovereign immunity. The government cannot be sued. The government doesn't fine itself. This is coming from Thomas Sansonetti, the former Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department's Division of Environmental and Natural Resources. Now, as I mentioned before in the show, I have read the Constitution, and the phrase sovereign immunity does not appear anywhere in there at all. They just made it up so that when they mess up, nothing bad will happen to them. Minerals Management Service didn't bother inspecting. The Deepwater Horizon blows up. Nothing's going to happen to them. Securities and Exchange Commission sat on their butts looking at computer porn on taxpayer-funded computers for 12 years while Bernie Madoff looted his investors and employees. $60 billion worth of damage. Nothing happened to the SEC. There is no sovereign immunity in the United States Constitution. The model that was established by the Founding Fathers was that everybody, from the bricklayer in the street on up to the president himself or herself, is subject to the same laws. We don't have that model anymore, as that judge in the Larry Klayman case just proved. oh, you can't touch the Clintons. They're the dynastic rulers of one half the country, and it's their turn to take over the White House. And as I mentioned to the caller, who's really going to make out like bandits on all this are the bottled water companies, who are already contributing to California's drought by sucking out all of the Californians' water for pennies, putting it in a bottle and selling it back to the California people for a couple of bucks. And with this massive spill on the Colorado River, people are going to be very distrustful of what's coming out of their taps. And with some justification. I'm sure the CEO of Nestle's out there saying, oh boy, our stock is going to go through the roof here. Up at the Navajo Nation, they've declared an emergency over this spill, basically coming into their lands. And it's not just going to wash away. It's going to leave all of these toxic heavy metals all over the riverbanks, all over any farm fields in which it is used as irrigation water. This is a major environmental disaster on the same level as the Deepwater Horizon disaster or Love Canal. It's going to be harming the health of people for decades to come along there. And I don't agree with this idea that the EPA should face no punishment or censure or fine or outright shut it down because of this. There is no sovereign immunity in the United States. There never was. It's not in the Constitution. It's a big, giant bluff by the government to tell you, the American people, that no matter how badly we mess up, you may not sue us because we said so. We're sovereign immunity thing. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, down here near Rio, at the venue for next year's Summer Olympics, they're already running what are called test events, where they're sort of junior versions of the competition, but they're running them on the locations to sort of work the kinks out before the main event next year. Apparently, 13 rowers on the 40-member U.S. team came down with a stomach illness during the World Junior Rowing Championships. And basically, the team doctor says pollution in the lake where the competition took place. So we have a lot of problems with an absence of fresh water. And it's mostly because of industrial runoff and just recklessness with what you've got, like the EPA just did out there on the Colorado River. Now, Cracked Magazine is a humor magazine, but they have a social conscience. And every once in a while they'll put up an article that is trying to be light and funny, but there's an undertone of accuracy there that we want to pay attention to. And I linked to this story, the 5 most spectacular on-the-job mess-ups by the police. And there was one I wanted to talk about that I think shows what's gone wrong with law enforcement. Out in San Luis, Colorado, this guy named John Morgan, calls himself John Morgan, back in 1986, goes in and starts handing out flyers offering cash for dead animals. He claims he was a taxidermist, he needs raw material to make his little fuzzy statues, and he didn't care how the animals were acquired. And he had a price list that went up to like $300 for a bald eagle. And the neighborhood he'd gone into was the absolute dirt poorest part of Colorado and northern New Mexico. 25% unemployment, and this is back in 1986. Average yearly income of $7,600. So you can see what happened. Hunters went out and started bagging these animals and turning them over to this John Morgan, who, as you're probably not going to be surprised to find out, was a federal agent on a program to root out poachers in the area, and they swept down and they arrested all these people and they sent them off to prison. Except for the fact that none of them would have been poachers if they hadn't been entrapped in this sting operation. Now, entrapment is when the police set you up to commit a crime and you commit it and they arrest you. And that's clearly what's going on here. They went into the poorest area of Colorado and said, I'm going to offer lots of money for people to go out and kill animals for me. And of course they went out and killed animals. That's not crime prevention, that's crime creation. And I'm sure at the next budget meeting they said, oh, we got all these poachers in Colorado, we need a bigger budget for next year. And there are too many agencies in our government that operate like that. Too busy to actually go out and find problems. Let's just go on out and create one. Then we'll arrest the people, we'll get some media attention and a bigger budget, and we'll all be happy. There's another big scandal, and this one is of serious concern. It's being reported in Russia today. Apparently the FAA did a study on air traffic controllers. They work very long hours. It's very intense, high-concentration work. And this study showed that most air traffic controllers are literally battling chronic fatigue. And these controllers are getting less than 6 hours of sleep on average on a work week and working very long hours. And the FAA suppressed the report because you're supposed to believe our air traffic system managed by the government is just wonderfully efficient. And they had found that due to fatigue, there were a lot of errors, like planes being brought too close to each other. And we're seeing too much of that in the U.S. government. They're messing up, but the people don't need to know. The people need to be made to believe that the government is doing a wonderful job, no matter how badly we mess up. Now, yesterday we were talking about the immediacy of a new world war for people in Europe. Here in the United States, we have not seen armies marching on each other since the Civil War, which is ancient history. I don't think there's anybody still alive from the Civil War. I think the last veteran passed away a few years ago. For the people of Europe, a lot of them are old enough to remember what war on their territory felt like. There's still a lot of damage there. Here in the U.S., they're trying to erase all the Confederate monuments and memorials, and they can't even sell the flag at the Gettysburg Memorial anymore. Trying to make it all go away so you forget about what war's like, what the horrors are. And then we followed it up with a story that came out of Russia about two kids just out there having fun, being sent to the hospital when an unexploded World War II mine went off right next to them in a field. It's still very real for them. And so now all of a sudden, we're looking at this story out of Interfax, where a 250-pound bomb from World War II has been found in London. It was discovered in the basement of a 4-story building, in a place where access was limited. It's been there untouched for 70 years. And that is why Europe is going to be very, very cool about a whole new world war on their territory. And they have a right to be. They absolutely do. Now, repercussions are continuing to spread out from Scotland's declaration that it will flat out ban all genetically modified crops on its soil. And they're saying it's there to protect the environment. It's there to protect the health of the Scottish people. They're taking advantage of new laws passed by the European Union that says the member states get to decide whether they want GMO or not. This law was, of course, being fought tooth and nail by Monsanto, and it is a provision in both the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership that GMOs are allowed everywhere. They cannot be banned, and GMO labeling is banned, which is a bill they've got in the U.S. Congress to just completely bypass the will of the people, like the voters out on Maui, to say you will allow our GMO seeds, you will not identify them as GMO, and if people get sick, well, we'll sell them medicines and pills and stuff to make them all better again. And it really is the rise of fascism around the world, where governments and corporations work together against the general population, just turning us all into walking wallets. You will be a consumer and a laborer, or you are of no use to us, and you should go away. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, the Clintons may be off the hook with the RICO lawsuit Larry Klayman had filed, because The judge was a Clinton appointee who refused to recuse himself over what is clearly a conflict of interest. But she's not out of the woods just yet. Hillary wants all this stuff to go away by the end of the year so she can campaign all next year on being the woman candidate and the symbolic candidate. And see, the vast right-wing conspiracy has failed once more to take us down from our divinely inspired mission for America, whatever the heck that may be. But she's not out of the woods. Apparently, and even Fox News was reporting on this one. Okay, the Inspector General for the Intelligence Community has notified senior members of Congress that 2 of the 4 classified emails found on the server Clinton had in her New York home were classified at the highest levels of classification, more sensitive than previously known. We're talking top secret classified information, and it was classified at the time on her server, despite Hillary's assurances to you, the American voter, that she had no classified information on her private unsecured server, which security experts were saying was completely wide open. As Richard Nixon said, it's not the crime that's going to get you. It is the cover-up. And Hillary is still thinking about this as a law problem. How do we get out of the legal problem? Well, we get our good friend the judge to just throw the case out of court and we'll be home free. Can't do that with Congress, though. But in terms of running for office next year, Hillary needs to recognize that politics is perception, and the public perception is turning against Hillary. She's covering something up. We don't even need to know what it is. The cover-up itself is a reason to not vote this woman into any more positions of power and authority over us. So there's no question she had classified information on that server. Now then, I want to talk about this drug or chemical or treatment. It's called GCMAF. And it has been making the rounds, a little bit of buzz, for quite some time as being a potential cure for cancer. Not a treatment, a cure, an outright cure. Now, cancer is a very complex issue. Cancer rates are rising. There is something we are exposed to, whether it's petroleum fumes, chemicals in the food, electronic radiation from our appliances, radio and television. Nobody wants to talk about it, but there's no question cancer rates are increasing. They do occasionally find cancerous tumors in ancient bodies that are excavated. The pharaohs, the dead kings that bob up at the top of those peat bogs. But the incidence is very rare. Very rare. Today, it's estimated almost 25% of Americans are going to get cancer at some time in their life. For all the talk about we're fighting cancer, we're finding a cure, no, they're not. Cancer rates are going up, and the cost of cancer treatment is going up, and nobody's looking for a cure because that is not profitable enough. Now, right now, even the National Cancer Institute admits, left to themselves, 25% of all cancers will spontaneously cure themselves. The rationale for mandating treatment for everybody is we don't know which 25% that's going to be, so we will just treat everybody with chemotherapy and radiation and all these other things that cost huge amounts of money. And it's already been established that chemotherapy and radiation may knock down the initial cancer, but it will re-emerge in a more virulent form, usually 5 to 10 years down the road. Radiation doesn't cure cancer. It causes it. There's no question about it, but that's the preferred method of treatment. And anybody who's come along with anything that might either actually be effective against cancer or at the very least reduce the symptoms so that the cancer is survivable is immediately attacked. Now, many years ago, Bob Guccione, who was the publisher of Penthouse, he published other magazines as well. Most people don't know about this, including magazines on alternative health and nutrition. And his wife was the editor of many of these. And his wife came down with cancer and decided she was going to try an alternative treatment called hydrazine sulfate, which has been used in Europe and Russia for decades. And hydrazine sulfate is not a cure, but it reduces the cancer's impact on the body. So you just don't feel it, and that makes the cancer survivable. And it's had huge success in Russia and Europe. There are a couple of doctors in the U.S. trying to promote it. There was a big scandal because the National Cancer Institute's under public pressure finally scheduled an evaluation of hydrazine sulfate and then proceeded to violate the test protocol. Because the test protocol said hydrazine sulfate is to be used on patients who are not receiving radiation or chemotherapy. And, of course, the Cancer Institutes immediately started giving this drug to people who were already compromised by chemotherapy and radiation and said, well, we don't see any difference. It's useless. It's junk. Get out of here. And then Bob Guccione's wife, and I forget her name, had to go to the hospital on a totally unrelated matter and died on the operating table unexpectedly. So now we've had, over the last couple of months, this series of alternative medicine practitioners, people who were critical of the vaccine industry, and they have died under mysterious circumstances, or they're still missing. Nobody's ever found the bodies. There are even now websites devoted to where did all these doctors go. And it has surfaced that most of these doctors who have met with strange fates had formed a loose alliance to study this GCMAF. And whether or not it really was effective as a cancer cure. And the cancer industrial complex does not want a cancer cure. They want cancer treatments they own so that you come back month after month after month after month from more chemicals, more radiation, whatever, and you are a guaranteed revenue stream for as long as you shall live. A cure is a bad idea for the business model. You come into my shop with cancer, I give you a shot, you're cured, you go away, I never see you again. I never get more money from you. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, you're really getting off in conspiracy theory, la-la land with all of this nonsense, until you consider that the cancer industrial complex in the United States of America is a $95 billion a year business. And it makes that money by selling continuous treatments to cancer patients. A real cure is a serious threat to that cash flow. It's the kind of potential financial loss that very quickly lures unethical business leaders into hiring special operatives to deal with troublemakers. And along that same line, there's a former Merck employee who has turned into an anti-vaccine activist, who is now out there saying that she is being terrorized by the black ops branch of big pharmaceutical corporations. And this is tied in with the release in 1999 of Vioxx, which was selling 80 million patients worldwide. It was supposed to be the answer to inflammation without nausea. It was a huge financial success. But there were doctors who were saying, we think there's a problem with this. And they were being attacked, discredited. There were attempts to revoke their medical licenses. And I'll give you the rest of the story after this commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this lady, Brandy Vaughn. She used to work for Merck and Company. She was a sales representative for Vioxx. She quit Merck in 2003 after she found out that Merck had falsified the safety data on Vioxx. Merck's own tests had shown it doubled the risk of heart attacks and strokes. They covered it up and went to market anywhere. A lot of people died. There were lawsuits all over the place, and Merck withdrew Vioxx from the market in 2004. But it's important to understand, this pharmaceutical corporation knew they had a product that was causing harm, but as long as it made money, they put it out there. And it was only when the cost of the lawsuits and the loss of sales from the outing of the fraud put it into the red ink. Then they said, well, we're going to pull it from the market. We can't make money off of that anymore. And this lady, Brandy Vaughn, says that these pharmaceutical companies literally have special dedicated departments that go on out and try and threaten anybody who questions their products, discredit doctors, get their licenses revoked, because apparently that costs a lot less money than actually making a safe and effective product. That's the mindset going on. Now then, still with Merck. As you know, we talked yesterday about how there is a mumps epidemic at the University of Illinois in Champaign, Urbana-Champaign. 69 confirmed cases so far. They're expecting a lot more. And, of course, the conventional wisdom in the corporate media is you need to get the MMR vaccine because that will protect you from this epidemic. Except that these students who came down with mumps had the MMR vaccine, not once, but twice. Because of overlapping regulations, you've got to get this, and no, we don't recognize the last one. They'd had it twice. The director of the Illinois State Health Department responded by saying, well, okay, maybe you should get it a third time. The third time will make it work really good for you. So there's this big story that came out in Natural News where there is a lawsuit over in Pennsylvania trying to get the safety data for the mumps vaccine from Merck, because it was discovered the safety and efficacy data Merck has been putting out all this time is 50 years old. That's 5 with a 0. 5 decades. We don't know if the current vaccine is even the same formula or recipe. More than likely it is not. Even Reuters got on their case, saying Merck was being evasive, using stock answers, and apparently Merck said they can't run new clinical trials to determine the efficacy today. Just trust us with this data that's from half a century ago. Now, Jim Carrey, comedy actor, and one of my all-time favorite movies is The Majestic, for reasons I've already made clear. He got involved in all of this. He used to be hanging out with this woman who runs a vaccine autism website. They're not together anymore, but Jim Carrey still supports the cause out there. And he's out there in this story in Investment Watch blog and elsewhere saying the CDC can't solve a problem they helped start. They can't afford to admit they've been wrong, just like any other large institution. And it is important to understand something about the CDC. Like the Federal Reserve, they maintain an image that they are somehow connected with the government to be there to take care of you. They aren't. They're a private, for-profit corporation. They get huge amounts of financial support from these large pharmaceutical corporations. And don't forget, it wasn't all that long ago that a whistleblower came out and reported the CDC had resorted to fraud in their own study that claimed to show there was no link between vaccines and autism. They cherry-picked the data to come to a conclusion that was going to make their masters over in the corporate boardrooms happy. That's their job. And this idea out in California that your child has to have 40 of these vaccinations before they can go to public school, and that no exemptions are granted for any reason. This is not about public health. It's about making the pharmaceutical companies richer because they write really fat campaign donation checks. And I'll tell you why. Let's say you have 100 people, and 99 of them are talked into getting the mumps vaccine. The one unvaccinated kid in the middle is not a problem. He shouldn't get mumps because everybody around him is vaccinated. And if he does get mumps, he shouldn't, in theory, be able to infect anybody around him. This idea of 100% saturation is all about money. The big pharmaceutical companies can't make enough money making medicines that cure really sick people because they generally may not work. The sick people will sue. The business model has become, we will find ways to sell medicines or something that we say is a medicine to perfectly healthy people who may not need it, get the government to force them if they do not want it, take our money and go home. We really have returned to the same moral level as the traveling Wild West medicine show, where the con artist would roll his wagon into the middle of the town, brightly painted, bang a drum, ring a bell, crank down a little stage on the back, have a hoochie-coochie girl dance around to draw a crowd. Then he'd come on out and he'd spin this horror story that out there on the far plains there's a plague laying waste to the Native American population, and it's heading this way, and you're all going to be horribly sick and die, unless you buy a bottle of Dr. Mike's snake oil, which is only 10 cents. And the townspeople would fork over their dimes. Con artists would hand out the bottles full of pepper oil, take his money and skedaddle. The townspeople would drink the pepper oil, think that they were protected from a disease that doesn't actually exist, and they'd go home happy. And that is the moral level the pharmaceutical industry is operating on right now. They can't be bothered making actual working medicine that cures real disease. No, they're too busy making money selling medicine to perfectly healthy people who do not need it. That's the business model. And it's big business, huge amounts of money, the kind of money that people will kill to protect, especially in a fascist economic dictatorship. Okay, going on down here, let's see. Hackers hid car phone warehouse breach with a denial-of-service smokescreen. Apparently, while they were breaking in to steal all the user data, they hit the servers with a denial-of-service attack in order to lure the staff away. So they're paying attention to the DOS attack and not seeing the indications that they're being broken into. And where is the National Security Agency in all this? Given billions of dollars and a license to ignore the Constitution, what good are they? You would think, post-Ed Snowden, the NSA to be looking for any way that they could have a positive public image by finding the cyber criminals and the spammers. They aren't doing it. It means they can't. And we know why. We proved at our website that anybody with a little programming experience can create new methods of codes and encryptions the NSA cannot break. They are absolutely impotent. They don't want to admit it because they don't want to give up that budget and those big data centers and flying in jets around the world thinking they're James Bond or Jason Bourne and on high adventures at taxpayer expense. They don't want to admit they're a complete failure any more than the Securities and Exchange Commission did after the Bernie Madoff scandal, any more than the Minerals Management Service did after the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon. Government agencies are religions. They survive on your belief in their benevolent effectiveness. And it is a lie. We're going to, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. Get something useful done with the rest of the day. I've got a mix to finish for the lovely Lady Claire, her latest piece of music. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Please take a moment to contact your local talk radio stations. Point them at gcnlive.com. Ask them to carry our programming. It is working. We're actually starting to get calls from these talk radio stations. So keep it up, and thanks to all the Rivero's Rangers. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.